Right now on the National Weather Desk, it's Inauguration Day, but it's so cold in Washington, the ceremonies and parade have moved indoors. We'll look back at Inauguration Day weather in years past, marked by snow, rain, and bitter cold.
The noon temperature was just 7 degrees with wind chills that afternoon as low as -20.
Those bitter cold temperatures are bringing a chill to the south, even the threat of snow.
Houston isn't really a snowfall type of area.
Also, why researchers are going back to the Ice Age to better understand our climate.
Because of human-induced climate change, we might have another one of those episodes.
And our weather team teaches lessons in today's social meteorology.
From our nation's capital, this is the National Weather Desk.
And a very good morning and welcome to the National Weather Desk. I'm WJLA Senior Meteorologist Brian Vandegraff. Well, one of the coldest inauguration days in history is today. In fact, it is so cold here in Washington that the ceremony and parade have been moved indoors. Take a look as we head through the day. Temperatures struggling to get much above the mid-20s, but that's only part of the story. You factor in those winds around the northwest, 15 to 25, and our feels like wind chills will be in the upper single digits to lower teens all afternoon long. So it is going to be bitter no matter what you're doing out and about. I think it made a good idea to move everything indoors. But if you're out and about heading to the different events throughout the day or even balls tonight, make sure you dress appropriately. Tonight, single digit feels like temperatures are anticipated even downtown. Well, President-elect Trump will take the oath of office and delivers an inaugural speech inside the Capitol Rotunda. It's the first time that that's happened since 1985. Meantime, the inaugural parade will be inside Washington's Capital One Arena. That's where we find Joy Wang this morning.
The security checkpoint wasn't going to open until 7 o'clock, but some people lined up as early as more than 12 hours in advance. In fact, the man I talked to that was at the front of the line, he told me he showed up at 6:30 last night. He attended the Capital One Arena event last night. Once he got out, he got back in line. But by the time our crews got here just after 4 o'clock this morning, thousands were already in line. And so as we were looking at the security checkpoint, we did see a lot of people kind of leaving some of their items behind, the items that they wouldn't be able to bring in with them. And a lot of people also showing a lot of excitement because even though it's been very, very cold out here, a lot of them telling me that they're just excited to be here even in the cold.
Well, obviously, Inauguration Day weather has been unpredictable, and we've seen bitter cold like today, as well as heavy rain and even snow. We have two reports on some of the more noteworthy years from National Weather Desk meteorologists Matt Ritter and Emily Gracie.
Inauguration Day has been taking place on January 20th in Washington, D.C. since 1937, and before that, in March. So, of course, weather can play a pivotal role in this outdoor ceremony. Let's take a look back at the extreme weather of inaugurations past. The warmest January inauguration took place in 1981, as Ronald Reagan took office. The noon temperature that day was a comfy 55 degrees. Of course, 4 years later, the weather took a major turn, and he also wins the award for the coldest inauguration ever in 1985. The noon temperature was just 7 degrees with wind chills that afternoon as low as -20. The snowiest inauguration occurred on March 4th in 1909. William Howard Taft was sworn in as nearly 10 inches of snow blanketed the city. Despite the huge crowd that still made it to the Capitol, the ceremony was moved inside. And probably the most tragic presidential inauguration occurred in 1841 as William Henry Harrison was sworn in on a cold and blustery March day. He refused to wear a coat or hat during his 1 hour and 40-minute address and while traveling to and from the Capitol on horseback. If you're having trouble remembering Harrison, it's because he was only president for 1 month. He got sick that day, developed what was presumed to be pneumonia, and passed away after just 32 days in office. For the National Weather Desk, I'm meteorologist Emily Gracie.
More recently, there were flurries about an hour before President Biden was sworn in 4 years ago, but they ended before the ceremony began. Washington's never had much snow on January 20th. The all-time record is just 3.8 inches, and that was in 1975. In 1961, a surprise snowstorm dropped 8 inches of snow the day before John F. Kennedy's inauguration. It caused the most crippling traffic jam of its time. The president-elect canceled dinner plans and reportedly only got 4 hours of sleep. The U.S. Army Corps of Engineers helped clear the snow and abandon cars from the parade route. The rainiest was in 1937 during Franklin Delano Roosevelt's second inauguration. 1.77 inches of rain fell, setting a record for the day. Sleet and freezing rain also mixed in. After the soggy ceremony, the president rode back to the White House in an open car and about half an inch of rainfall on the floorboard. In 1977, it was sunny, but temperatures were just below freezing for Jimmy Carter's inauguration. The cold didn't bother him, though, as he and First Lady Rosalind Carter became the first couple to get out of their car and walk down Pennsylvania Avenue during the parade.
And it's not just cold here in Washington. Much of the nation is below average today and will be for several more days to come. And we're not the only one talking about the usual spots. We're also talking about other places around the nation. Check out some of these temperatures. Houston dropped to 29 degrees last night. It's now preparing for its biggest winter storm in 65 years. Over in Atlanta, the low was 19 degrees. Now compare that to Minneapolis, where today's high will be 7 degrees below zero. And while in Chicago, the mercury will rise to a balmy 11. But hang in there, because tomorrow, well, it'll only be 2 degrees. And you can see just how much of the country is affected by this Arctic blast. We have some extreme cold warnings stretching from the Canadian border all the way down into West Texas, even into North Florida as well. Another 2/3 of the country, just some of the coldest air in years. And you see that pink down through eastern Texas, Louisiana, even into portions of Mississippi and Alabama? Well, that is a winter storm warning where 3 or more inches of snow are expected, in addition to the likelihood of some ice as well. As Troy Kless reports, cities like Houston just aren't used to this type of storm.
Once we see ice start to form, we apply continually until we start to see it thaw out.
Jennifer Almonte is Precinct 3 Road and Bridge Director, coordinating 15 trucks to cover nearly 7,000 roadway miles and more than 600 bridges in their precinct, mainly areas north of the city.
We're really asking people not to be on the roads. We'd like to have really only emergency vehicles out.
They are also urging homeowners, including HOAs and mud districts, to turn off sprinkler systems to prevent other roadways from possibly freezing. If they do, these teams will be there to respond.
You know, Houston isn't really a snowfall type of area, so we don't have snowplows and that type of equipment in stock. And so we've had to really be creative and inventive in different ways to clear the roads.
So just why is the South getting snow? Well, the jet stream dipping south is just part of the reason. Austin meteorologist Avery Tomasco explains.
As that's happening at the surface, we're going to have an upper level low approaching from the northwest. And most importantly, Gulf of Mexico moisture riding up and over this cooler air mass will lead to a high likelihood of precipitation. The question then is, what kind of precipitation will we see here at the surface? Has to do with your temperature profile, both at the surface and through the higher elevations of the atmosphere. If it's above freezing from floor to ceiling, it's just a cold rain like we had last week. No problem. You add just a little bit of cold air close to the surface, below 32 degrees. Suddenly that rain is freezing on contact with trees and bridges and overpasses, leading to infrastructure issues and, of course, very hazardous travel. If you increase the cold air just a little bit, make it a little bit colder and a little deeper at the surface, then that rain is freezing into ice pellets before reaching the surface. Still leads to roadway concerns, but falls harmlessly through the trees. Only when you entirely chill the atmosphere from floor to ceiling can that precipitation fall as full snow.
And when it gets this cold, it's important to know the signs of hypothermia. Meteorologist Eric Castriva has details.
Best thing you can do is just stay inside as much as possible. But if you have to venture out, if you have to be outside for a long period of time because of work or anything that you may be doing, make sure you look out for the signs of hypothermia, including confusion, shivering, difficulty speaking, sleepiness, stiff muscles. Could happen to you or anyone around you that is also outside. You want to keep an eye on them as well.
It's not cold in Southern California, but red flag and high wind warnings are once again posted for areas around Los Angeles. The National Weather Service already posted another PDS, particularly dangerous situation, for this afternoon through tomorrow morning. Gusts could peak between 70 and 100 miles per hour, and with humidity levels in the single digits, the weather could be ripe for more fires. And coming up on the National Weather Desk, why climate change means more than just rising temperatures around the globe, and why scientists are going back to the Ice Age to better understand our climate.
watching the National Weather Desk.
Well, earlier this month, we learned that 2024 was the warmest year in recorded history. Most experts attribute that to climate change, but climate change means much more than just warmer temperatures. Meteorologist Allison Miller has more.
Basically, our high pressure moved over more directly over you.
Dr. Randy Cerveny is a meteorology professor at Arizona State University.
To lift that moisture up.
But that's not all.
One of the hats that I wear is as what is called the rapporteur of extreme weather for the group called the World Meteorological Organization.
This is a group that sets the standards for taking weather measurements all over the world.
So that we're taking temperature measurements in Texas the same way that we are in London or in Australia.
Dr. Cerveny says all of these weather gauges point to a warming climate, but it's not that simple.
Unfortunately, a lot of people think that when we talk about global warming, we're saying that all places on the earth are getting warmer. Well, the earth doesn't act as a single unit. So that when we start changing the temperatures around the planet, we're also going to start changing the storm patterns.
That means changing where droughts or hurricanes occur. Dr. Cerveny says it'll take entire countries making changes, or we'll have to adapt to the new weather extremes.
The grand scheme of global warming is a terribly complex issue.
Maybe it's the next generation that can help us tackle it.
I get emails every day from children around the world whose interest has been sparked by some of the changes that we're seeing. And the way that we're going to solve these problems is having more people study them and come up with innovative solutions to handle them.
And we can learn a lot about our current climate situation by looking at the last ice age. Meteorologist Allison Guttleber reports.
Understanding the climate hundreds of thousands of years ago. That's what one OSU professor is doing. Christo Bowser tells K2 their study collected ice cores from Greenland. The oldest ice they could recover from Greenland is close to 120,000 years old.
We go to these places, go to the interior, and we drill an ice core all the way from the top to the bottom. And in this way, we can have access to those snow layers that fell really long time ago.
Ice cores, which are long cylinders of ice, contain layers of preserved ice and snow and are used to help understand the climate long ago. In the study, researchers are looking at specific climate events. These are called Danskar-Oshker events. They are known to be the most abrupt climate change events ever seen, which are not caused by humans.
Around 25 really abrupt climate change events that we think are linked to the circulation, the ocean circulation, the ocean currents of the North Atlantic Ocean.
I asked, what does this mean for the future?
This is a good question, right? And so the reason that we are so interested in these abrupt events is that there is a possibility that they could happen again in the future. What's happening in the future is that because of human-induced climate change, we might have another one of those episodes.
Well, here's a fun fact about snow. Did you know that not all snow melts? Some of it disappears into thin air. It's called snow sublimation, and scientists have been studying this process in Colorado to find out how much of it is really disappearing. Emily Gracie sat down with the lead researcher to find out why this information is so useful.
You can think of snow sublimation kind of like evaporation. It's a little bit different because it is the transition of the ice solid phase directly into the vapor phase, water vapor, without necessarily going through this liquid phase of water. Right?
What causes snow to sublimate, to go from this solid state to a gas state?
Snow is constantly transitioning between the solid phase and the liquid phase and the vapor phase. There's an equilibrium occurring everywhere in the world. And what happens is that in really humid environments, so most of the East Coast, the very West Coast, there's very little net sublimation. That on average, there's so much water in the air already that the water basically stays in the snow. And so the only way you lose snow in those environments is by melting it. Whereas in really dry environments, so most of the mountains in Colorado, really everything east of the Cascades and the Sierra Nevada mountains is a much drier environment. And in those situations, this equilibrium goes the other way. Where the air is dry, it can always take more water vapor. And so on net, you're losing snow to the atmosphere through the process of sublimation.
Why is it important to study snow sublimation?
The impact of sublimation versus melt on, for example, water resources is very different. If snow melts, that's great. It goes into the ground, it goes into our rivers, it goes into our reservoirs. If snow sublimates, it's gone.
So where is it going if it's not getting back into that?
Right. So it's gone from the local setting, right? It's still in the water cycle. It hasn't left Earth. But it doesn't help very much if the places that are already dry are the places that are losing water. And it's going over to places that are already wet, and they're getting more water.
A segment we call Social Meteorology is designed to highlight social media posts from our national team of meteorologists. These typically involve weather lessons that help you better understand how weather impacts you. And we start with Emily Santum in Portland, Maine, and a lesson about grapple.
What is that? This is grapple, and here I am to explain. Grapple is a type of precipitation that of course falls from the sky as little small pellets of ice. I like to say they look like Dippin' Dots. They're also known as soft pellets or maybe even small hail. We of course see them during the winter months, or when it's cold enough. Those are little snowflakes though that collect super cooled water droplets on the outside of them, which gives them that ice pellet or maybe even Dippin' Dot appearance. They form when there's cold air aloft, meaning very cold air in the upper atmosphere. They're kind of cool. Let me know in the comments if you've ever seen them before.
Frost flowers. Let's get into it. So you may have seen photos like these kind of floating around on the internet lately, and these are called frost flowers, and they're actually pretty rare. They're rare because they can only happen one time per year to each individual plant. So what you need for this to happen is a moisture in the soil or the ground, but freezing air temperatures. What happens is that moisture, unfrozen from the ground, moves up a plant's stem, and when it freezes, when water freezes, it expands. So it ends up splitting that stem. It forms these thin feather-like petals, and as more moisture keeps coming in, freezing is occurring, it kind of grows into these frost flowers. These do not last long after sunrise. They'll either melt or sublimate with the warming temperatures.
Have you ever seen something like this in the night sky, the ring that forms around the moon? It's typically something that you see during the colder months and especially into the winter. It is known as a moon halo, and the clouds that you see around the moon are high clouds called cirrus clouds. They're made up of ice crystals or ice particles, and this ring forms when light is refracted from the moon off of these ice particles. They're typically seen around a full moon in the colder months. Fun fact too, because these ice crystals and cirrus clouds are hexagonal, they actually almost every single time create the same type of halo around the moon. It's typically around a diameter of 22 degrees.
Time now for a short break, but first we take flight over the mountains of Utah.
The National Weather Desk.
Well, some dogs love to play and exercise in the cold and snow. Others, well, not so much. As veterinarian Devin Smith explains, as long as you take the proper precautions, winter can still be a great time to get outdoors with your pooch.
Just because the weather may be getting colder doesn't mean that you can't have fun with Fido. In fact, many dogs love and enjoy a romp in the cold just as much as some people. It can be so exhilarating. This is where it's important to get to know your pet and his or her preferences. Certainly, some breeds like Huskies or Bernese Mountain Dogs thrive in colder weather. However, this doesn't mean that shorter-coated breeds like Vizslas can't have fun. They just may require some wardrobe assistance in the form of a sweater or a jacket to help keep them warm. Now, if your pet hates the cold but has a lot of energy, look for indoor swimming pools for pets, which are great ways to exercise your pet in the winter without having to be outside. Connect with us at our station website by looking up For Pets Sake. We'd love to see your favorite pet moments that you can share with our community. Go to our news app, click Explore, chime in, and upload your pet-tastic photos.